We're going to go through the install of DSFW. It's going to go kind of fast so that we can get through in the amount of time. But just real quick, you can start with the helpful tips on DSFW and the documentation. It gives you some good pointers on where to start with some information. It doesn't have all the TIDs on DSFW, but it does have some pertinent ones, specifically preparing for a DSFW install, which is what we're going to do. And this is going to be geared towards an OES11 install. So keep in mind with an OES11 install that it has to be on a SLES 11 SP1. Now that server can already be installed, or you could be installing OES at the time of installing the server. It's up to you. It's just an add-on product. So I prefer to do the SLES server first and then do the add-on product. That way you can make sure that you have it set up just the way you want. A big thing to remember here is eDirectory cannot have been installed on the server. Do not install eDirectory on the DSFW on the server beforehand. If you have an existing OES server running, of course running eDirectory because it has to, you cannot turn it into a DSFW server. It's going to have to be a brand new server. So first big point. Next thing is extending schema. If you're unfamiliar with that, it's very easy to do. It's not really required. Generally, you can get through it without it because it didn't extend schema during the install. But you just go to the OES tools, click on the schema tool, and we just log in. And generally, you'll do this on an existing OES server. There are some other options if you look at the documentation from doing it from a Windows client if you need to. But you just click on Domain Services for Windows, say Next, and it's extended. So that's it. That's really simple to extend schema from an existing OES server, at least. Next, your host file. This is key for your domain name because whatever is in here in this Etsy host file is what your domain is going to be. You do not have the option to modify this during the install. So this has to be set up properly beforehand. The two pieces you need are the loopback address and then the comment, just having the IP address, the server name dot domain name, and then the short name for your server name needs to be in there. On OES 11, it's possible to have this .2 for the loopback address as well as the .1. This will cause a problem. This TID addresses that issue if you run into it. I have seen also that people that, well, at least look like they have removed it. Maybe they went and removed it afterwards, but run into it. Basically look at this TID. It goes through the exact error that you will get at the configuration. This is during the YAST part of the configuration. You will have the option to run the task again. It's the XAD / which is DSFW. It's roughly at 93% of the install. If you see this error, follow this TID. It's real simple. I mean, it comes down, it gives you exactly what you're going to be seeing. You'll see, basically, it's going to come down to it can't resolve the host name. So this is the file that it's trying to run right here, this secure PM. So you just need to open that up, look for this line. It'll be local host. You're just going to change that to the loopback address, 127.0.0.1. So you do that, save it, and then rerun the task, and it should complete. So to prevent that, again, make sure that .2 is not there in the host file. Something else to look at is this host name file. This is something new with OES 11. You want to make sure it has the server name .domain name. Now, these files here, so if one of them is off, what will happen is you'll get to the configuration part of DSFW and YAST. That line for your domain will be blank. If it's blank, it's because these files are off. So I'll show you a couple of things here. So we'll just look at it. VI the host file. This is what it looks like. Very common. The loopback host, the IP. Just basically just what we showed. Those are the two keys. Then the host name, right there. Just very simple, one line. And then the resolve.conf is the next one I'll go over here since we're in here. And this is the key to this one is the name server. The first name server is the DSFW server. It will install DNS on the server in order to configure the zone and the necessary records. The next version of OES should have the ability to use an existing DNS server, but this one still you have to install DNS. Once you have it installed, you can transfer it, you can take it off, continue to use it, however you want to use DNS. But at the time of the install, this server has to be listed first, and DNS will be installed on this server. So do not install DNS before installing DSfW. That does not work. That will cause even more problems. So it'll be blank, brand new server. When you select DSfW, you'll have the option. It will install DNS, the Novell DNS, and just make sure that the server is listed first. So those are for the files. Those three files: host, hostname, and resolve.conf, which is right here, are important. You can do it through right here, the network configuration tool in YAST. I'll show you which is which file. So this right here, we're going to click on in the overview, click Edit. This is editing the etc hosts file. So we have our IP, our host name. That's the host file. We'll just say next, and then the host name is right in here. Host name /DNS. This is where whatever you put here populates that. And then right here, your name servers, this populates resolve.conf. So just keep that in mind. If you get this set up straight, it should be good, but I would still recommend going and looking in those three files, opening them up, and verifying just how it is in the TID on how it should be. Something that it talks about in here is don't use a .local. I know Microsoft recommends it, but don't do it. Use a .int or .lan or .internal instead of a .local if you're wanting to do a domain that is just an internal domain. That's what you want. If you're using a .com or .net or .org, make sure you own the domain name, because you might be getting even though you're pointing to your DSfW, your DNS server, it will have the root servers, and it might get sent out to the internet, and all of a sudden you're trying to log into, like Novell.com, at Novell's, trying to join a workstation to Novell's domain type thing, which is not going to work. So make sure that if you have a .net or .org, that you own that domain name. If not, use a .int or .lan. So just good rule of thumb. And this is the resolve.conf. You can see the name server. Again, make sure yours DSfW is first. When doing a name app install, make sure that it's partitioned off. And with OES2 SP3, the name can be different. So in this case, let's just look at it. So we're going to set it up at the O level. And something to keep in mind is that wherever, let me go back and forth there, wherever you set it up, that's where the force starts, and it goes from there down. So you cannot go sideways. You cannot. Boy, this is taking a while to come up here. Here we go. So it would have to come from here down. You cannot set up another O to be part of the domain, or set up a domain at that level. Does not work. It's from that O down. So if you want to set it up at B, it would set up at B, and it would be from B down, the very first domain controller, I should say, or first domain, from B down. You would not be able to set one up at C or D or above. So at the sibling or a parent level, you would not be able to do it. So make sure, as for your placement, first of all, know where your users are at, and know that it's from that location down. So just some planning for your domain. That's probably the biggest thing. Your users have to reside within the domain. Again, the domain is any object that's within the domain that's not in a partition will be part of the domain. So all these users will be part of this domain. B, C, D, E, they will not be part of the domain, although with OES11 I do have the option to add them into the domain, these partitions. Again, you can see the little icon means that it is a domain. So just keep that in mind as far as your placement. You've got your max depth 5, 10 domains allowed per forest, with maximum of 5 domain controllers per domain. So just some rule guidelines. A lot of this doesn't really apply to OES11 now. OES11 you can have disconnected domains where, say, we have a domain here. At this partition, we don't have a domain, but say we go down below it. At BB, we create a partition, and we want to put a domain there. We can do that. Previously, we could not do that. So there's a lot more flexibility that you have with OES11 and OES2 SB3 as well. So let's look at some ACLs. This isn't as critical as it used to be. It used to be if you had any of these that the install would fail at assigning the rights in the provisioning wizard. It's not the case anymore. So if you want, just go. Still good idea to remove, but it can get through it. It can detect it's there and continue on. But we'd go through and see if something was listed. There is one listed for public. So what we do is look at the assigned rights. It was public CN. I do not see CN here, so we are safe. It's good. So as you can see here, it is public CN. We didn't see root or this or these other ones, so we're good. Anyway, so something to keep in mind. Names. Make sure that these names do not exist specifically directly underneath the container, because it will fail. It is possible to have like a computer's container lower down in the domain, like in another container, but not directly underneath the domain container, or the container where you're mapping the domain to, because your install definitely will fail if that is the case. It's recommended that you do not have another object in the tree with this name. Again, this doesn't have to be the same object class. It's dependent on the name, not the object class and domain, but just the name itself. So any of these objects, if they exist, make sure that at least at a minimum that they're not directly underneath the container where you're mapping the domain, and preferably not even in the domain, because there's a chance it can cause some problems later on with some queries and things like that. So just to keep that in mind. With the OES11, your master will remain on your eDirectory server. You can move it. It gives you a little bit better performance if you put it on the DSfW server, but not that real significant, so not a big thing. Time zones, make sure that's set up. Health check, you should be familiar with eDirectory health checks. Just go through, here's the TID to go through and do that. This is a key one here. The AppArmor. There's AppArmor installs this Perl module. If you don't install AppArmor, this Perl module does not get installed. Really, there is a dependency on this Perl module. So if you decide not to install AppArmor, which should be there by default, but if you decide not to, then make sure you install this Perl module. Hopefully, the next release or next patch version will have this correction so that this dependency will be resolved properly. But right now, it's not getting being seen as a dependency, even though it is a dependency. Otherwise, you follow this TID, this will go through the failure that you will receive. The other big piece here is LUM. With OES11, you have this, you set up your Unix config object and such. So there is a possibility that you could get this 614 error at the assign rights task. To prevent that from happening, follow this TID. And basically it goes through, tells you Gecko, GID number, home directory. You need to remove these from the public trustee. So that's going to your container where you're mapping it to, going to modify trustees, so public, clicking assigned rights, and saying Gecko, GID, we need that one. I think home directory, and we just look at this list. We'll just remove these. So you just select, and then remove those, and then anyway, just go through the entire list of member, UID, login shell, and UID number. So UID number, login shell, all those, click and remove. If you don't do that, you're not really in trouble. You will see that error. Just come down. There is a script right here. Just copy and paste this script on the server, and go ahead and it basically tells you all the way down to the end. It'll tell you where the end's at. Anyway, just cut and paste that on there, run that script, and you should be fine. And the final thing is, don't unselect anything on the pattern. Select DSfW, click that, let it check what it needs, and continue.